My stepfather laughed when he called me a glorified nurse, loud enough for the room to hear. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain. I just stood there, knowing the next time my hands were needed, the truth would surface, and it would cost him everything he valued. If you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, subscribe now, because what happens when truth finally steps forward might hit closer than you expect. I hadn't planned to be home that weekend. In fact, if my mother hadn't called 3 times in one afternoon, I would have stayed exactly where I was, 6 hours away in a city that didn't know my past and didn't need me to explain myself. But she'd sounded tired, not dramatic, not emotional, just worn down in the way people get when they've been swallowing disappointment for years. "Just come for dinner," she said. "Mark's having some people over. It would look good if you were here." It would look good. Not "I miss you," not "I need you," just optics. I packed an overnight bag and drove anyway. The house looked the same when I pulled into the driveway, too big for the people inside it, too polished for the way conversations actually went. Mark loved appearances. He'd built his entire identity around them. He was my stepfather in title only. He'd never tried to earn the role beyond marrying my mother and assuming authority came free with the ring. I walked in quietly. The smell of catered food hit me first. Not home-cooked, not familiar, expensive and impersonal. Voices followed, loud, confident, layered with laughter that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. A business dinner, of course. Mark stood near the center of the living room, glass in hand, telling a story he'd told 100 times before. Same punchline, same forced laugh at the end. He was surrounded by men in tailored suits and women who smiled on cue. My mother hovered near the kitchen, refilling glasses, nodding at things she didn't agree with. When she saw me, relief flashed across her face, then disappeared just as quickly. "Good, you're here," she said softly. "Go say hi to Mark." I didn't rush. I set my bag down by the stairs and walked toward the living room, aware of how I looked. Simple jeans, flat boots, a dark blouse with sleeves rolled just past my elbows. No jewelry, no effort to impress. Mark noticed me mid-sentence. His smile faltered. Then he recovered. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he said, loud enough for it to draw attention. "This is my stepdaughter, Claire." No last name, no context, just stepdaughter. "She works in healthcare," he added, waving his hand like he was dismissing smoke. "One of those nursing roles. Helpful, but nothing glamorous." A few people nodded politely. One woman smiled and said, "That must be so rewarding." Before I could answer, Mark chuckled. "Let's not exaggerate. She's not a doctor. More like support staff. A glorified nurse, really." The word landed exactly where he wanted it to. I felt my mother stiffen behind me. I met Mark's eyes. He was smiling, confident, satisfied. He enjoyed moments like this, little public reminders of hierarchy, of where he stood and where I didn't. I could have corrected him. I could have explained my credentials, my experience, the years I'd spent earning trust in rooms where panic could kill faster than mistakes. But I didn't. I smiled instead. "That's one way to put it," I said calmly. Mark nodded, pleased. "See, she doesn't mind. She knows her place." That was the applause line. Conversation moved on. Stocks, acquisitions, some upcoming conference Mark was desperate to be invited to. I drifted toward the kitchen where my mother avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry," she murmured, handing me a glass of water. "I know how he is." I know. That was the problem. I stayed quiet most of the evening, listened, observed. People reveal more than they think when you believe you're insignificant. Mark talked about a potential investor coming later, someone important, very important. "Big money," he said, "the kind that changes everything." I didn't react. I didn't need to, because about an hour later, the energy in the room shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just subtly. The front door opened again. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A man stepped inside, flanked by 2 others who didn't need to announce who they were. He didn't dress loudly, no flashy watch, no exaggerated confidence, but everyone felt it. Mark practically sprinted across the room. "Mr. Hale," he said, beaming. Billionaire, that was the word people whispered, like saying it too loudly might draw attention to their own bank accounts. Ethan Hale. I'd seen his name in places that mattered. I'd also seen him in rooms that didn't. His eyes scanned the space, not for admiration, but for exits, for people, for threats. They passed over me once, then came back, just for a second. Mark noticed and shifted his body slightly, blocking the view. "Can I get you a drink?" Mark asked quickly. "Anything you want." "Water's fine," Ethan said. Mark snapped his fingers in my direction without turning around. "Claire, be useful." I picked up a glass, filled it, and carried it over. I set it down carefully in front of Ethan. "Here you go," I said. "Thank you," he replied, meeting my eyes. Not politely, intentionally. Mark laughed. "She's very good at following instructions." Ethan didn't smile. Instead, he asked, "You said she works in healthcare."
Mark waved his hand, like I said, nothing serious. Ethan nodded slowly. I see, he said, but his eyes stayed on me a moment longer, and something in his expression changed. Not recognition, interest. I felt it then, the same instinct that had saved lives before, the quiet awareness that something wasn't quite right. Ethan shifted his weight slightly. His hand trembled, just barely. I noticed. No one else did. Not Nark, not the guests, not my mother. But I did, and that's when I knew the night wasn't going to end the way Mark expected.
Ethan took a sip of water. He winced, just a flicker, so fast most people would miss it. His fingers tightened around the glass, his jaw clenched, then relaxed. I didn't move, but my attention locked in. Mark was still talking, something about quarterly projections, something loud and pointless, the kind of talk people use to feel important while saying nothing. Ethan bought it at the right moments, but his focus drifted. His breathing wasn't right. Too shallow, too controlled, like someone trying not to draw attention to discomfort. I'd seen that posture before, too many times. He shifted again, pressing his thumb into his palm, a grounding technique. Pain to distract from something worse. That wasn't anxiety. That was physiology. I stepped closer, not obvious, not abrupt. "Sir," I said quietly, "how long have you been feeling dizzy?" The room didn't hear me, but Ethan did. His eyes snapped to mine. "About 10 minutes," he said just as quietly. Mark frowned. "What are you doing?" I ignored him. "Any chest tightness?" I asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "A little." My pulse spiked, but my voice didn't. "When did you last eat?" "Lunch. Early." "And your left arm?" I asked. "Any numbness or tingling?" Another pause. "Yes." That was enough. I straightened and raised my voice just slightly, not panicked, controlled. "He needs to sit down. Now." Mark laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, come on," he said. "She's being dramatic. He's fine." Ethan swayed. Just a step, but it broke the illusion. I moved instantly, steadying him before he hit the floor. The glass shattered somewhere behind us. People gasped. Chairs scraped. "Call emergency services," I said, loud now, clear, commanding. "Tell them suspected cardiac event, male, late 50s. Silence. No one moved. Mark stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. "What are you doing? You're embarrassing me." I turned to him. This time, I didn't smile. "Get out of my way," I said. Something in my tone cut through him. He stepped back without realizing he was doing it. I lowered Ethan onto the couch, elevating his legs slightly. His skin was pale now, sweat beaded at his temple. "Stay with me," I said. "Look at me." He did. "You saved my life once," he whispered. I froze for half a second. 2 years ago," he continued, breath shallow. "Mid-air emergency. You were called in last minute." The room faded. I remembered. The turbulence, the cramped aisle, the way his heart rhythm went unstable fast. I'd stabilized him before landing. No press, no photos, NDA signed. Just another life saved, then forgotten. Except he hadn't forgotten. "You knew it was you," he said faintly. "The moment you looked at me." The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance now. Good. Too slow, but good. I monitored his pulse, coached his breathing, kept him conscious. Everything else was noise. Mark stood frozen. His guests whispered. My mother watched from the kitchen, hands over her mouth. When the paramedics rushed in, I gave a clean, efficient handoff. Timeline, symptoms, interventions. No fluff. One of them looked at me and said, "You medical?" "Yes," I replied. "What's your specialty?" "Critical care." His eyebrows rose. Ethan grabbed my wrist weakly as they lifted him onto the stretcher. "Don't let him take credit," he said, eyes flicking toward Mark. "Promise me." I leaned in. "I don't need credit," I said. "Focus on breathing." They wheeled him out. The door shut, and the room exploded into sound. Mark rounded on me. "What was that?" I faced him calmly. "That," I said, "was a myocardial infarction you almost talked through." One of the guests muttered, "Heart attack?" "Yes," I said. "And if I'd listened to him," I nodded at Mark, "you'd be explaining to the press why your guest collapsed and died in your living room." Mark's face drained of color.
That's ridiculous. You're exaggerating. My mother spoke then. Quiet. Firm. No, she said. She isn't. She looked at me differently now, like she was seeing me for the first time. The room cleared quickly after that. Excuses, awkward goodbyes, people suddenly remembered early mornings. Mark didn't stop pacing. This could ruin me, he muttered. If this gets out. I cut him off. It already will. He scoffed. You think anyone will listen to you? I met his eyes. He will. 3 days later, Ethan Hale released a statement. Short, precise. He credited a highly trained critical care specialist for recognizing the early signs of a life-threatening cardiac event and acting decisively. He named me. The media did the rest. My inbox filled. Interview requests, hospital commendations, speaking offers. And then came the final blow. Ethan pulled his investment, publicly, citing concerns about leadership judgment and crisis management. Mark lost everything he'd been posturing for. He didn't say another word to me. Not then, not ever. A week later, my mother called. She sounded lighter. She said, I should have defended you. Yes, I replied. She didn't argue. That night, I got one last message from Ethan. Still here because of you. Thank you for everything. I closed my phone and went back to work because I wasn't a glorified nurse. I was the reason he was still alive. And now, everyone knew it.
Fame is loud at first. Then it gets quiet in a way that's far more dangerous. The week after Ethan Hale's statement, my name was everywhere. Health blogs, business columns, morning shows that mispronounced my credentials but got the gist right. The woman who noticed what everyone else missed. The glorified nurse who saved a billionaire. People loved the irony. I didn't, because attention doesn't come without distortion. At work, administrators suddenly remembered my name. Doctors who barely nodded before now lingered in doorways asking my opinion like it had always mattered. A framed certificate appeared outside my unit with my name spelled wrong. I asked for it to be corrected. It took 3 days. What didn't change was the load. Same shifts, same understaffing, same broken equipment held together by duct tape and optimism. Recognition doesn't fix systems. It just pretends to. One afternoon, my supervisor pulled me aside. We've had inquiries, she said carefully, from private firms, consulting groups, very high-end. I already knew. I'm not interested, I said. She studied me. You should at least listen. I listen all day, I replied. I act. That's the difference. She didn't argue. Outside the hospital, things were less controlled. Mark tried to rewrite history. First subtly, telling people he'd trusted my instincts that night, then more aggressively, suggesting he'd encouraged me to step in when Ethan looked unwell. I let it go, until he tried to use my name. A journalist emailed asking for comment on Mark's supportive role during the incident. I replied with one sentence. That is factually incorrect. The article never ran. My mother came over that weekend. She brought groceries I didn't ask for and apologies that were overdue by years. I didn't know how much you carried, she said, setting down bags like they were peace offerings. You knew, you just agreed with him. She flinched. That was new. I was scared, she admitted. He made me feel small, too. That's not an excuse. It's a choice, I said. She nodded, slowly, like someone accepting a diagnosis. I left him, she said. I looked up. 2 days ago, she added quickly, I packed while he was at work. That surprised me, not because I thought she couldn't, but because she finally did. Where are you staying? I asked. With my sister, for now. I nodded. No celebration, no relief, just data. Good, I said. Don't go back. She reached for my hand. I let her, this time. Mark spiraled fast after that. Without Ethan's backing, investors followed suit. Board members distanced themselves. His charm lost its leverage when it stopped being profitable. Then came the call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Listen, Mark said without preamble. We need to talk. No, I replied. I'm serious, he snapped. You're enjoying this too much. That made me pause. Enjoying what? I asked. My downfall, he said. You could stop this. I laughed, once. You're confusing consequences with revenge, I said. I didn't do anything to you. You humiliated me. No, I said calmly. You humiliated yourself. I just didn't save you from it. Silence. Then, quieter. You made me. That did it. You didn't make me, I said. You tried to shrink me. I grew anyway. That's not your accomplishment. He hung up. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Ethan's office. Not a thank you, an offer.
He was launching a new initiative, private emergency response teams embedded into high-risk environments, corporate retreats, international flights, offshore operations. People with money paid for layers of protection. This was about competence. He wanted me to lead it. I read the email 3 times, not because I was unsure, because I needed to be precise. I asked for full autonomy, transparent hiring, no PR interference, no symbolic titles. He agreed. I asked for written authority to override executives in medical emergencies, no matter their status. He agreed. I asked for funding guarantees tied to outcomes, not optics. He agreed. I said yes. The announcement landed quietly. No spectacle, just a line item in a business brief. But inside the industry, it hit hard. People knew what it meant. I resigned from the hospital a month later. My last shift was chaotic. 3 codes, 1 save, 1 loss. I cried in the locker room like I always did. No cameras, no applause. Just the work. On my final day, a junior nurse stopped me. "They say you're famous," she said nervously. I looked at her badge. She was new, exhausted already. "Don't chase that," I told her. "Chase competence. It lasts longer." She nodded, like I'd given her something solid. The new role was brutal in a different way. Long hours, high stakes, 0 tolerance for ego. I built the team carefully. People who spoke plainly, people who corrected me without fear, people who didn't need to be the smartest person in the room to do the right thing. The first major incident happened 6 months in. A tech founder collapsed during a summit in Dubai. His security froze. His entourage panicked. My team moved. I overruled 3 executives and a lawyer who threatened litigation mid-resuscitation. The man lived. Ethan sent one message afterwards. "This is why I chose you." Mark sent nothing, but I heard about him anyway. He tried to pivot, consulting, motivational speaking, lessons learned. No one listened. The last I heard, he was selling his house. My mother visited my new office once. She looked around quietly, the clean lines, the absence of noise. "I didn't know women could build things like this," she said softly. I looked at her. "That's because you were taught to not look," I replied. She didn't argue. She's learning. So am I. Power doesn't announce itself. It shows up early. It pays attention. It acts before permission is granted. That night in Mark's living room wasn't the moment I became something. It was the moment everyone else realized I already was. And this time, no one laughed.
The thing no one tells you about power is this. Once you have it, people stop lying to you and start lying around you. They smile, they flatter, they over-explain, they pretend alignment while quietly positioning themselves for leverage. I learned that within the first year. Our response unit grew fast, faster than I wanted. Governments reached out, corporations followed. Everyone suddenly believed in preparedness once they saw what failure looked like on camera. I kept the rules tight. No sponsorship logos on uniforms, no executives overriding medical calls, no brand partnerships during emergencies. That alone pissed off half the people funding us. Good. The breaking point came during a closed-door retreat in Switzerland. Ultra-wealthy attendees, no press, everything curated to feel untouchable, until it wasn't. A private dinner, candlelight, wine older than most of the staff. Then one of the guests, a board chair with too much confidence and too little restraint, started choking. Not theatrically, silently. The room froze. People always freeze. I was already moving. I cleared the airway, assessed, called for equipment. My team moved like muscle memory made flesh. Then a hand grabbed my arm, hard. A man in a tailored suit leaned in. "Do not make this a scene," he hissed. "We'll handle it privately." I looked at him. "Let go," I said. "You don't understand who this is." I broke his grip. "I don't care who this is," I replied. "I care what's happening inside his throat." The patient aspirated seconds later. We intubated, stabilized, transferred. He survived, barely. The next morning, complaints rolled in. Not about the delay, about me. Too aggressive, too visible, too uncompromising. One email suggested I be reassigned to a less public-facing role. I forwarded it to Ethan. His reply was immediate. Absolutely not. But that wasn't the end of it. Pressure doesn't come from one direction. It seeps, it multiplies, it waits for cracks. The board requested a review. I agreed on one condition: full transparency. Every decision, every override, every complaint, in public session. They didn't like that. I didn't care. The hearing lasted 4 hours. I didn't raise my voice once. I laid out timelines, outcomes, survival rates, legal precedents, ethical obligations. When someone accused me of being too emotional in crisis situations, I paused, then asked them to define emotional. They couldn't. When someone implied my background made me overreactive, I asked them to clarify which part of my training they found excessive. They changed the subject. At the end, one board member cleared his throat. "Do you think you're irreplaceable?" he asked. I answered honestly. "No," I said, "but your tolerance for preventable death seems higher than mine. That's the real problem." Silence. The review ended with no action taken. 2 board members resigned quietly within months. Mark showed up again around that time. Not directly, he published an article, a long one, about resilience, about forgiveness, about how ego-free leadership meant knowing when to step aside and let others shine. He never named me. He didn't have to. People sent it to me anyway. I didn't read past the first paragraph, because I didn't need to. I'd already outgrown the need to be understood by people who only notice you when you stop serving them. My mother called later that night. "I saw him," she said. "Where?" I asked. "At the grocery store," she replied. "He pretended not to recognize me." "That's new," I said. "He looks smaller," she added. I closed my eyes. That's what happens when someone builds their identity on being above others. There's nowhere to stand once they fall. She was quiet. Then, "I'm proud of you." I let that sit. Not because it healed everything, but because it was finally said without conditions. A year after the night that started it all, Ethan invited me to a small dinner. No cameras, no donors, just people whose lives had intersected because someone paid attention when it mattered. He raised a glass. "To the people who see what others dismiss and act anyway." He looked at me when he said it. I didn't smile. I nodded. Because the truth is, I never needed the apology, or the recognition, or the reversal. What I needed was distance from people who mistook proximity for authority. Mark thought titles made him powerful. He thought mocking me made him bigger. He was wrong. Power isn't loud. It's precise. It shows up early. It listens longer than it speaks. It acts without waiting to be invited. I wasn't a glorified nurse. I was the person everyone underestimated, right up until they needed me to keep them alive. And by the time they understood the difference, it was already too late to stand in my way.